I am Silver Spook, also known as. Is it live? It should be live. Is it live? I just pushed the start. Anyways, aloha, um, aloha, kako. I am Silver Spook. I'm a Native Hawaiian activist, defender of our sacred mountain, Mauna Kea, on the ongoing illegal occupation of the sovereign country of Hawaii on the Big Island of Hawaii. And Today we're going to be having a very special discussion panel of all of our relatives from across the Pacific. This is an exclusively Pacific Islander panel. This is like the opposite of the AAPI panel, which was actually the AAHC panel, the Asian American and Hillary Clinton panel from earlier this year. This is the missing part of that. We have all Pacific Islanders here, representatives from Okinawa, from Aotearoa, from Palau, from Hawaii and Philippines. So I'm very I'm very excited to be part of this discussion. We're going to be talking about Pacific, our peoples of the Pacific, our cultures, as well as our collective struggles, and how we can help unite East and West in win-win cooperation rather than needless conflict. I don't think we're going to solve world peace in the middle of this panel, but we might discuss it a little bit of things that have happened in the Pacific, including the ongoing and accelerated militarization and colonial incursions. The colonial era did not ever end. But anyways, without further ado, I want to let everybody kind of just go around and introduce yourselves. Starting from, I'll start from the top left. So, Akemi, go ahead.
Hi, Saigusio. My name is Akemi. I use they, them pronouns, ella, ellas in Spanish. I'm originally from Peru, and I moved to the States when I was around 5. Um, I discovered like my Uchinanshu, Luchu/Luchu/ Okinawan heritage slowly over the course of like the past decade. Um, Within the past years, when it's like really kind of I'm like, oh, Okinawa and Japanese are like completely different things and like different cultures and things like that. So it's been like a learning journey. Um, and luckily, I started tuning into Silver Spook right around when I was discovering all this stuff because it would have been really hard on my own and also lost to, like I've mentioned before. But yeah, that's me.
Thanks for being here. Awesome. Also, thanks for tuning into the streams. Sorry, I go on for so many hours. But anyways, welcome also Dr. Kavika Guillermo or Chris Patterson.
I almost hit the disconnect button accidentally. I was very close to doing that, rather than the unmute. Yeah, hi. I'm Chris or Kavika. Very happy to be here. Um, like Silver Spook was saying, I think I'm the Filipino representative on the panel. Though I'm not indigenous identified. I'm Filipino mixed race settler here in Canada. I'm in Vancouver right now, living on unceded Musqueam territory. Through my mother's side of the family goes back many generations in Hawaii, and before that to the Philippines, and perhaps to Taiwan. We're not really sure where things go from there. It depends on who you're asking. Um, but they were sugarcane pickers, in Hawaii, along with a lot of other folks, and so they integrated with a lot of indigenous communities there. Though I do not identify as such myself. I'm mostly a researcher of colonization in what we call the Trans-Pacific, which is like the new word for Pacific Rim in some ways, but focusing mainly on the Philippines and Southeast Asia and Oceania. Um, yeah, I went back and forth between Hawaii a lot in my upbringing, and I also lived in South Korea for about a year, and then mainland China for 2 years, and then Hong Kong for 2.5. And I traveled all over Asia and wrote a book about it called Stamped, an Anti-Travel Novel. It's a fictionalized account of that. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. My research these days, Silver Spook kind of contacted me when I was like right in a research like mess of like 2 or 3 months where I haven't really surfaced for very long. But I've been basically deep in research about thinking about how like brownness and different forms uh, of racializing, I guess, brownness or Malayness and Polynesianness have been kind of foundational to a lot of anti-colonial and anti-imperial sentiments and actions in the Pacific and in Southeast Asia. And so that's been an interesting project, and I'm glad to kind of surface from it for now before going back into it. And as Silver Sprig knows, I also study video games, so that's one form of media I look at a lot to think about violence and empire today.
Yeah, excellent. Full disclosure, I have worked with Kavika or Dr. Patterson, and I am going to be participating in a collaborative virtual teach-in. If I'm not getting, maybe I'm getting that wrong.
A guest lecturer is the technical term.
Guest lecturer.
Whatever.
Guest lecturer. So I will be guest lecturing at the University of British Columbia. But yeah, I'm very happy to. I have read parts of. I have not completed any of your books. I'm really sorry to say that, but I've read like good sections of Open World Empire. Highly recommended, and learned a lot. And also, yeah, we have. I'm from the era where a lot of Chris's family is from, and Neofeud is based on the experiences in that area of Honolulu, Oahu. Anyways, thanks so much for being here. Shaw, why don't you go ahead?
I was trying to be really careful and not disconnect either. Those are very close to each other. My name is Sha Ongalongala. I am, what does my professional bio say right now? I think it says I'm a rabble-rousing, professional, benevolent troll, which I think is pretty accurate. I use multimedia, social media to tell people stuff. Sometimes it's just me complaining. Sometimes it's actual like useful information. It kind of varies by day. I have been on one of the live streams before, and I really just made a career out of complaining about stuff around API, AAPI, PI, non-existent PI, and apparently now Hillary Clinton has a AAPI. But yeah, I am currently calling from stolen Multnomah land. That's Portland, Oregon. I technically live in Hawaii, but that whole traveling thing during the Pandesal, it's not really working out so well. So I'm here, and sometimes I spent the last couple months in Minnesota working on the Stop Line 3 front lines, and that's kind of my big work-related project right now, is working on Build Back Fossil Free and Keep It in the Ground campaigns, and helping with the media on that with the organization I work with. And I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. Shaw's not going to say, but I believe that one of your bosses is in Reservation Dogs, if I'm not mistaken. Is this true?
Yes, Dallas Goldtooth is indeed my immediate supervisor. So in addition to getting to talk to him throughout the workday, I can also watch him on Hulu and collect memes about my boss without getting in trouble for laughing.
Awesome. I love watching your boss on a horse, making it's very good. Anyways, it's very entertaining. So good to have you on. Yeah, Shaw is a return guest. Very happy to have you as well. Mahalo. And finally, is it Yaron? Is that correct?
Yep. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Yaron. I'm tangata Maori, or more specifically Ngāpuhi is my tribe. I am an artist who helped with art for the video game Umurangi Generation. I guess in some ways I'm a little bit of the stand-in for Ves, who's the main developer, but I am also another Maori with a lot of opinions about Pacific stuff, so very happy to be here.
Excellent. Yeah. Good to meet you. Yeah. Oh, I think I messed up something. Yeah. For full disclosure, I am friends with Umurangi Generation's lead Veselikov, or I think Naftali. Who has been, we were on a panel with John Romero recently. So, Tali, we want to get on another one of those. So you gotta get on that so we can get John to develop a massive indigenous run MMO. Anyways, well, yeah, really good to meet you. I know I've seen you around as well, Yaron. So good to have you here. Yeah, so I'm glad everybody's introduced. I know some people have to go soon, so I'm not going to take up too much time. I talk all the time, so I want to let everyone else do as much as they want to speak about these issues. I know when I messaged everyone, I kind of threw out, there's a lot of ways we can take this, of course, but, just one of the jumping off topics, of course, is the, as I said, kind of there's a history, of course, of colonialism across the world, right? And we've already kind of talked about in Turtle Island, in North America, in U.S., Canada, people kind of understand a little bit about how, to different extents, how that process of the stealing of the land, et cetera, displacing the indigenous peoples has impacted the peoples there, of course, and how the settler colonialism has been a problem. That's very much been in a lot of the discourse for some time. And not that is very important. However, I think less people fully understand how there are indigenous peoples throughout the Pacific that also have our lands occupied. In the case of Hawaii, as I brought up, illegally occupied under the United Nations High Commissioner on Human Rights. So it's a pretty specific form of illegal military occupation and fraudulent annexation that we undergo here in a continuous method, in a continuous state. The UN has literally ordered the United States to respect the Hawaiian Kingdom's laws, but that's a large can of worms. So, but that's a thing that is the Pacific is a place where there are a lot of islands. It's outside the territory of a lot of settler colonial majorities. Let's say Canada, Australia technically is, New Zealand are, they have large settler colonial populations. Hawaii as well, but there's less known, I think, is the how the islands have been used for the purposes of imperialism against Asia in particular, but also as just kind of launching pads, as of course a lot of people know about the tourism here in Hawaii and how there's a kind of cultural it's kind of like harvesting fruit from Central South American colonies. And Hawaii also had a dole who was a famous fruit colonizer, also with his brother helped overthrow the Hawaiian country, Bob and Sanford. Anyways, so I think there's a lot of ways we can take this, but one thing I thought was very interesting was I recently learned this word. There's many words, but one of them is the word hui, which is a word in Hawaiian, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Maori. They don't all mean exactly the same thing, but they have very similar meaning, which means coming together to work together cooperatively, for the mutual benefit of the people in diaspora Chinese settlements, like for example in Chinatown, and also the Hawaiians who worked in these areas. That's where I'm from, Kalihi, Palama. Coming together and working on a restaurant, working on in a kalo patch or a rice patch or a rock wall or a revolving kind of cooperatized credit system. This is a thing that binds all of these. It's a thing that is across all of these cultures, across thousands of years. It doesn't always mean exactly the same thing, but it does unite a lot of other peoples. And so we actually share a lot more in common than we think. And, and so that's kind of why I wanted to have this to kind of discuss how we are bound as the peoples of the Pacific, and of course of Asia as descendants of people that largely migrated from the East. And how we have similarities and of course differences, but we have a lot more similarities, and we're tied in a struggle against imperialism, particularly now between a massive imperial superpower and one of our elders, let's say that. Anyway, so anyone who wants to jump in, I just said a lot of words. Anybody can jump in and react to what I just said.
Well, I can share real quick that although I don't think hui existed in Uchinaguchi, which is one of the Luchu languages. But there does exist the word Yuimaru, which sounds a little similar, and then Maru is like circle, round. But Yui means like the reason for, or one of the definitions for it is like the reason for, and Yuimaru is the spirit of cooperation or something along those lines, and it's like a really important concept in Luchu culture that I've learned about.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was just reading about like the Luchu and Taiwan and Okinawa are very actually close as well, geographically, and they have there's some language crossover there as well. Yeah, I think like I'm trying to think of a jumping off point. Like Sha, I wanted to really ask you this because I've read this and I was just reading this article about the militarization. I mean, it's not the happiest topic, but they're planning to build a bunch of very large new military bases in the Federated States of Micronesia, but not. They're expanding in Hawaii as we speak. They've been bombing 30 miles from where I stream. I bring this up. People think I'm joking. I'm not joking. They're practicing for war against Asia right here. They have historically, and they're expanding rapidly, quietly, sometimes not so quietly. Kamala Harris was just in Vietnam, and then she was here, trying to set up new, let's say, military partnerships. In the wake of the multi-trillion-dollar, one of the greatest war crimes of the 21st century, travesty of Afghanistan, and the abject failure that they have to admit there. I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot and put words in your mouth. So let me just say, how are your relatives doing, or how is everybody doing in Micronesia? I hope they're not, doing too bad.
So, like with any imperialized nations, communities, colonized communities, there's that camp that's like, oh, this is great, that's fantastic, and I just scream a lot, both externally and internally. And then there are the people who I tend to align with more, things my dad did, people who are very anti-imperialization, and are very much like demilitarized Pacifica. So I grew up in that, and just like some backstory and context. There are the three main COFA nations, like COFA is in Compact of Free Association. There's the Republic of Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of the Marshall Islands. So the COFA, the concept of COFA and being a Compact of Free Association, anytime anyone offers you anything, free association, like don't take it, don't touch it, run away screaming, light everything that they bring with them on fire, get rid of them, like it's bad. The Compact of Free Association, in theory, was supposed to allow people from the Micronesian region to come to the United States. You can apply for financial aid, you can get healthcare, you can have benefits, you can travel without worrying about your immigration status. We're considered migrants versus immigrants. There's a lot of things that were supposed to go with it, including financial benefits to those nations, which I believe were supposed to last 50 years. However, the US then gets access to the land forever. So not the best, it wasn't the best negotiation ever. We have known that this was coming for quite some time. The Republic of Palau only became independent in 1994. RMI and FSM, I believe, were in the late 80s, early 90s. So we've known it's coming. They have like a CB camp in Palau. They use the islands for military training purposes. It's rough. A lot of people are stressed out over it. The last episode of my podcast, the Shenanigans podcast that I produced last year, I had gotten a copy of a letter from the then president of Palau, Tommy Ramalizao, that he sent to then Secretary Esper. So I published the letter, I read the letter, I went through and basically broke it down and explained all the different ways this is going to impact us in a terrible way, both in terms of the environment, the communities, the people. It's the same reasons that we shouldn't be doing offshore drilling, the same reasons we shouldn't be building casinos. All of that falls under there. Looking at how and I cited multiple sources and books and all those fun things. But like citing instances of sexual assault at military bases in Guam and Okinawa, citing the different ways that just the communities have fallen apart because of that presence. And so, apologies, I'm a little weird. It seems kind of, I would say, millennials and Gen Z are alarmed and understand why this is horrifying. Gen X, a little iffy. It kind of can go either way. And then boomers on up, it's like, we find it. It's a done deal. It's fine. I'm like, yeah, well, you'll be dead. Like, and in terms of like my parents, their generation is, they don't really fight this necessarily at this point. But during the 80s, during the referendum, the plebiscite, my dad was one of the people who went and spoke at the United Nations against this. And so, I mean, there's two very clear camps in how they're viewing it. There are the people who are like stressed out and this is going to destroy everything and how do we stop it? And there are people who are like, well, yeah, but they're going to give us money and they're going to give us opportunities, not realizing that we have opportunities and we have the means to develop our own industries and do these things. And so there's infighting and then there's fighting outwards. And I feel like a lot of people, when it comes to indigenous struggles, can relate to that. Like, it's never just us fighting outside. It's us fighting our own communities and trying to explain to them like why this is not to our benefit. And I think that tends to be the fight that hurts the most, is like fighting with your aunts and uncles and being like, no, this is horrible. This is going to devastate our land and the water and the people. And they're like, no, America's great. And I mean, how do you reason with a pile of rocks?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, I totally feel that one. I bring up, I get into heated arguments with my own father, who insists that Canada isn't committing genocide against the residential school against the children in Canada of indigenous heritage. He still insists to the day he will defend the Catholic Church to his death. He's more, I said, Father, you're more Asian and Pacific Islander. They beat the Hawaiian out of you. You know, his wife's knuckles were like shattered for speaking Hawaiian. You defending them still? You know, but he's like, no, I'm a white Catholic American man, you know, and you should be too. You know, so it's like, this is the seeds of colonialism. I forget, was it Fanon or Lenin? I can't remember exactly which one, but it was like the seeds of colonialism are planted, and then like there's much to undo. It is the most painful. You know, it is incredibly painful when it's your own family members that are like telling you to your face that, you know, your suffering is non-existent while they are suffering it. It's the most mind-boggling thing is when he fights it. I'm like, Dad, they burned us alive in Chinatown, you know, on the basis of the bringers of the plague. You know, the white Australian policy banned everyone, Asian, Pacific Islander, we're all the same thing. And you know, and you can't see the connection between that and, you know, why there are FEMA camps being rolled out in the back of Kalihi Valley to not while money is being held that could have helped increase the medical facilities, combat COVID-19. Filipinos, Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, they're preparing for mass death in Kalihi Valley as we speak on the Catholic Church property that he lives on as a Catholic Holy Roman Empire Neofeudal serf. Anyways, I'll stop going off about that. Yaron, how is the indigenous people of just full disclosure? I was under I learned what decolonization meant from Maori professors at the University of Hawaii. Nobody there taught me anything at the university system. They didn't teach anything about what that word meant, what the actual status of Hawaii as the state legal association teaches that you actually can't. You have to learn that Hawaii as a state of the United States is a legal fiction to pass the bar exam in Hawaii. How's that? You have to learn that the state doesn't exist in order to practice law in the fictional state. But that's Westernism. Anyways, but the Maori were amazingly informative. Albert Wendt he's actually someone, and I think he works in Auckland. He did at the time anyway. I thought colonialism was when the xenomorphs from aliens get shot by buff Americans with like blasters and supersonic weapons, in interstellar space, where no one can hear you scream. It's kind of like being a Pacific Islander. Nobody can hear you scream, especially at the UN. Who hasn't actually done that? I wish they would do more. But anyways, I hope that the Maori, I noticed that the Maori at least they have a recognition that like that's what has happened. Because my parents, they don't know anything. The schools that I went to, they didn't teach us anything. I didn't know anything about Hawaii. I didn't know my language, nothing. We were all just quote unquote savages and people that were lucky to have been graced with the good gifts of electricity and roads. When we had electricity before the White House, actually. Anyways, but yeah, I'll stop talking. Yaron, how have the Maoris been as successful as they have, while at the same time they have I know there are all countless struggles down there. So yeah, go ahead.
So it kind of goes back to the 1980s, maybe late 70s as well. We kind of had a bit of a boom in what was called the Maori Renaissance in some ways, because prior to the 70s and 80s, the Maori language and a lot of our cultural aspects had been on a sharp decline, and a lot of a lot of kaumatua, a lot of elders had kind of had realized this, and the knowledge that the ones who managed to avoid getting the language beaten out of them, the culture beaten out of them through native schools, they were able to pass this on to youth of that time, and there was sort of a boom in a lot of revival of cultural practices. There were schools for Motaiaha, which is a form of martial arts that we have here, and obviously language as well, early childhood education. So we had the Kohanga Reo program. We had a lot of things like that, and I think as well, the academic field, I think, has been something that has helped keep things preserved. There was a boom of maybe sociology, but social sciences at the very least. Maori who were in there that were able to like deconstruct the ways that we had been viewed in society throughout the 20th century. I'm just trying to pick up my train of thought. If I recall correctly, there was actually during this time as well, there was some academics had actually gone to Hawaii to help with language revitalization efforts. I can't remember specifics, but I do remember that was part of what had taken place. And while we had experienced this boom in a lot of cultural preservation, kind of on the flip side, unfortunately, is there's still a lot of historical amnesia in this country as well. Because we have a large settler population and they kind of control the narrative as everything is now. There's this denial of any wrongdoing. There's a denial of any need for revitalization, because even though we did get that revival, things still aren't great. Like fluent speakers have been kind of on a downward trend. But there are a lot of things about this country where there are just some things that we can't bring back yet because Pākehā control the narrative here. And as well as that, there's also, if there's any, First Nations Americans here, and you'll know this, but we also have a treaty. They haven't fulfilled any of their promises in it. So if that sounds familiar, hi. We also, as well, even though in our government we currently have quite a, I guess, liberal social democratic government, they talk a lot about upholding treaty principles, but never about upholding the treaty itself, or even any acknowledgement of our Declaration of Independence, which had come 5 years prior. So it's kind of a weird situation in which we know that there's problems, but every time we tell the population here there is problems, we need to address them, it just kind of falls on deaf ears, unfortunately. So that's where we are. It's like we're doing well. Some tribes are doing well for themselves. I feel that they should maybe take a less capitalist approach to the way that they do well for themselves, because it's very obvious that only a very few in the tribe actually benefit from that. Yeah, but it almost feels like a bit of gaslighting. Like, we'll explain in high detail everything that people have done wrong, and they will either just straight up deny it or act like we're crazy for having a problem with it. Like, we straight up had segregation during the 20th century, like almost at Jim Crow levels. Not everywhere in the country, but there were a lot of places specifically where it was very obvious that some spaces for Maori and some spaces were for whites only. Whew. Yeah. So I guess that's kind of where we're at right now. It's a lot of we have problems that need to be addressed, but whether or not people will acknowledge them is another question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah. So similar situation to a lot of us, well, similar to the Hawaiians and to the Okinawans, and as far as I can understand it. Anyways, but yeah, how is so so Kavika, how are we going to I know Kavika is doing great work. I know because I've read the books and I know you're trying your best. But how are those settlers up in Portland and up in Canada? How are we gonna figure out what to do about this?
I don't know because I'm kind of one of them right now.
Oh, yeah.
But just from coming from a kind of Philippine, Hawaiian perspective, that I'm lent from my family. Well, I like what you said and what Yaron was saying about, needing to kind of change the narrative, and how so much of what we deal with is like in our families and with our friends, with people we're very close to. And it's very frustrating for me because both of my grandfathers were preachers. And my Filipino grandfather in Oahu lived in Kailua and taught basically next to a military base there. That was most of it. Half of his congregation were like white people in this military base. And I saw him only a couple of times before, actually preach, and he would say things like, in the Bible it says the Jews can kill, non-Jewish people at will when they're walking around in the desert. That means you can go to Afghanistan and you can kill people. Like he would suggest things like that, like very directly, using the Bible and things like that. And it caused a lot of rifts. There's been a lot of rifts all over my family, but that was definitely one of them, like the religion and fidelity to not just American Empire, but to the military, that I think we all find, is because the military is everywhere, right? Like there's 750 plus military bases around the world outside of the US, which is on one hand just daunting, right? What could we possibly do about this on a grand scale? But it could also be a way of thinking like, well, there's so many people like us, right, who feel the way we do, who know, palpably what it's like to live under occupation and things like that. And so I feel like there's a lot of like this kind of work of bringing people together who have been studying these areas, who've been living in these areas, or who have like very foundationally been brought up in this. I think is really one of the only ways really that we can challenge the system on a large scale. Because otherwise, I feel very hopeless about those kind of things, especially here in Canada. I was reading all through the tweets about when all of the information about the recent information, I should say, about residential schools was coming out. These are things everyone knew. Like there's a big house totem right next on my campus that has 16,000 copper nails in it. And each nail represents a child who was killed in the residential system, who was lost in the residential system. Now, that information was never explicitly like released by anyone. Just the artist and the people behind that totem were like, well, we can't prove that 16,000 children ever made it through the system because we lost their names. We don't know what happened to them. So we have to assume that they're part of this genocide. And now we have bodies, right? We have more proof. And it's just kind of like, it almost makes things a bit worse because they keep moving the stakes, you know? It's like, well, if we just had proof, then we would change everything. And then you get proof and they're like, well, it's just not, you know, there's still something else we need to do. And I remember reading through all the tweets and everything that was coming out at that time. And one of them really stuck out to me, which was Canadians, you know, on the day they find out, like everyone's shocked. And then a minute later, they're just like, so what else, what are we going to watch on Netflix tonight? You know, and that is, it feels like that was a lot of the reactions from a lot of folks, was just, you know, there's a kind of innocence and just claiming to be shocked all the time by this kind of thing. And then moving on to whatever Netflix show we're going to watch or whatever. So I don't really, like, I don't think that really helps all that much, but I do think, you know, actions like bring people together like this, the direct actions that y'all are a part of, that we try to be a part of up here is really important. And it feels like the culture war is, you know, like watching what's going on in Afghanistan right now. This might sound like a bit of a rant, but trust me. You know, I feel like Hollywood movies and video games and things like that make us think like there's a way we could actually like challenge the empire on equal terms, as if that's anywhere, as if we could ever muster anything close to the amount of firepower and money and funding and everything. And so I think with Afghanistan is a really interesting point where people are miserable because, or I guess people in the U.S. are miserable that the U.S. has so-called lost this war, when in retrospect, you know, the amount of Afghani civilians and people who died is like 76 times that of American soldiers. So it's not great to win a war against the U.S. You win a war against the U.S., you still lose 76 times more people than the U.S. lost. So that is not a working strategy by any means. Like there is no kind of way to take on the empire in a kind of militaristic scale unless we're ready to accept those kind of numbers. And so I really am hopeful that, you know, forums like these and the kind of, you know, working through video games is incredibly important right now because it's so hard to find video games where the U.S. military is not seen as like sanctified, you know. Same thing in Hollywood movies, but especially in games. And we do need to change that narrative, right? I feel like the more people who play those kind of games, where that's not the narrative, right? Where the U.S. military is actually not seen that way. That's, you know, they grow up and they become different people, I think, I would hope. And so that gives me hope. And I feel like that's part of what we're all trying to do in different ways.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something that that's part of what I hope to do a little bit of with Neofeud is to basically you know, cyberpunk as a genre, which a lot of times is, you know, as we've talked about before, is a genre of you know, upper middle class settlers, like role playing poverty, internally colonized people's experiences in the ghettos that like I actually lived in. And so, and it not being a dystopian future, but it being the present, you know, and it's, and you know, and so like, I don't know, the games that I try to make, which American publishers and Western publishers don't want to publish, by the way, I'm going to say that. They said, you got to change all the politics of this game and we'll think about it. Like make it like, defang it, make it more like 12 minutes or Monkey Island or something else. You know, you can make it funny and humorous, but you know, just pull out everything that criticizes the military. Multi-thousands of Hollywood scripts. Ayn Rand wrote the entire Motion Pictures Association Screen Guide for Americans, the #1 anti-communist of the 20th, one of the top of the 20th century, wrote the entire book, and it's been followed by the Pentagon. And you should read Open World Empire by Kavika Guillermo to learn more about how games are a part of the system. And Call of Duty is one of the #1 recruiting tools for the United States empire, directly through DMs from the Navy and the Marines, etc. But also in establishing these narratives. Anyways, so you know, just on the topic of like altering the narrative, is part of it is decreasing. Oh, here's another fun fact I just realized. The Europeans also don't have any history. 75% of them, the French, believe that the United States won World War II. They knew in the end of World War II who did the majority of the fighting, who were communists, and they were not Westerners. In fact, most of Russia is Asian and Chinese is all Asian, and they were all red. But now, because of movies and fictional history or the failure to teach what needs to be taught in Europe, as well as America, 75% think that the greatest capitalist empire in the world saved the world from certain destruction rather than made billions of dollars funding the Nazis. And the victims of communism celebrated Ukrainian Nazis this month in Canada as well. They made a big statue as America drives for hybrid war with Russia and China as we speak in Ukraine. So that was Canada signaling we're still with the empire. We still love you, and we're going to keep slaughtering indigenous people, including Africans, to $31 billion worth of colonization there. But anyways, I'm just kind of jumping all over the planet. But I mean, it is very important to counter this narrative because it is so overreaching, and it is very difficult because people are inundated with like multi-trillions of dollars worth of, police shows about how America's police are great, and then world police shows about how America's world police are so great. And so it's very difficult, but we have to try our best. And so on that note, I'm gonna say Umurangi Generation. I'm gonna throw this game up on the screen just to give Selakov a shout out. This is one of those games that you should definitely check out if you have not yet, because it is a game that is about, I mean, to my mind, I played this entire game on stream, by the way. This is a game that is about a colonial occupation of, Umurangi means red sky in Maori. Ululani is the Hawaiian word for it. It's we're all very connected, and it is a game that does combat this narrative. So I just want to throw that out there, that if you're like, what am I going to play on my stream? Because I need to make money to pay for my basic bills, and the only way I can do that is through donations on some kind of gaming platform. Consider Umurangi Generation. I know people who follow this probably know what it is, but I recommend it. I played it all the way through. It's a very chill game. But anyways, back to just as another jumping off point. I know some people have to go pretty soon, but I did want to bring up one more thing, which is the I'm sorry about this. I lost my thread. In the Pacific, there is one thing is that right now there's a narrative that Yeonmi Park, I don't know if you know who this is was on Joe Rogan. He's a North Korean defector, let's say, who has been going around and saying things like, my country is full of death and poverty and destruction, and my country is terrible, and America needs to come save my country. Very similar to the Nair testimony immediately following the invasion of the Middle East in the 90s. All these human rights atrocities. There's a lot of this. That's part of the narrative, which is that the Western imperial countries like the United States, Canada, etc., and their allies are much better. And the U.S. military can bomb democracy into Iraq, Afghanistan. They can go back into North Korea, kill another 600,000 people there. Use chemical warfare, right? Like they accuse China of COVID, Wuhan virus attacks, and they actually deployed cholera. They deployed epidemics and Fort Detrick. They did a lot of fun things there, and then they deployed it against Asians and Pacific Islanders. And here's another fun quote. So this is what you have to remember. This is one thing, if you don't take anything else away, remember that one of the major reasons why they're in the empires are in the Pacific is because we must have Hawaii and Guam and Okinawa, and then hopefully Aotearoa can take all that island. Definitely Australia with ASPI and the military-industrial complex up inside of that parliament that's taking hundreds of millions of dollars from Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. They must have all of the Pacific to pillage China. And so, but that you never hear that quote, right? Like, there's a McKinley High School. I have friends that went to McKinley High School in Hawaii. You never hear this quote. All you hear is America gave Hawaii electricity when in fact, we Hawaii, and this I'll stop after this one. We had electricity before the United States White House, right? We had trains, we had railroads built by Hawaii. This is a Hawaiian engineer. We had universal health care 25 years before Europe. Otto von Bismarck introduced it into what's now Germany. 25 years after, we already had it, and they did it on the back of colonialism. Whereas we had full citizenship for Chinese and African peoples, and Canada had segregation, just like Australia and New Zealand, as was brought up. That was not the end of the Underground Railroad. Hawaii had full citizens, and we also had the highest literacy rate in the world. So, anyways, so part of why I always go over this is that's part of like not reconstructing, just saying true things in the Western world that hasn't had truth said at scale where it matters for thousands of years. It's about, bringing that truth back. That's what Neofeud is full of, things that are going to piss off a lot of people. They do piss off a lot of people, because when you've lived your entire existence in disinformation, right? Like not having your entire culture, or believing that Canada was an awesome, very just place that had very friendly, people who say sorry all the time, and they just have some Canadian bacon and cute moose, right? And then you learn that actually a genocidal state that continues to do that they have forced IUD insertions while they're accusing China of doing all these kinds of ethnic cleansing, and they're doing that in 2021 still. Anyways, I'm sorry about that.
If I could interject real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So on that kind of false image of Canada, New Zealand often gets referred to as the it usually gets referred to as Australia's Canada, which I think is very accurate in that we come off as very nice, but in fact we have a very hideous history that the settlers refuse to acknowledge.
I did want to piggyback off of something Kavika said earlier before I have to run away. If that's okay?
Oh no, go, yeah.
So because you mentioned Afghanistan, which I had a huge emotional breakdown over. And it took me talking with my auntie and trying to figure out, okay, with everything horrible going on in the world, why was it this one thing that, I literally collapsed over? And then it ties in with, bringing people together like this. So the IPCC report came out not too long ago, which basically spelled out climate crisis for everyone. If you're from Pacifica, you're screwed. And whenever people bring up that Afghanistan, it's been 20 years, it hasn't been 20 years. It's been longer than I've been alive. It's I'm nearly 40, and it's been my entire lifetime. The US has been messing with Afghanistan. So for me, being from the Micronesian region, the US doing the same thing with us. The speed with which the United States pulled out and was like, oh, we can't help them. There's nothing we can do. So it took a while for me to connect that, me freaking out was sea level rise, climate crisis, all of us in Pacifica, all of us facing these things, and especially for islands like Hawaii, like in Micronesia, where we fall under some sort of US imperial nonsense. So basically, they're going to use up all of our resources. They're going to let us go to shit. They're going to let us think that they're helping us through this climate crisis, but eventually we're going to be some rocks sticking out of the ocean that they're going to use for mooring. And a whole entire generation of islanders is going to be standing on somebody else's land as settlers going, but we're not settlers. Are we climate refugees? I used to have a home. My grandparents told us about it, but we don't, we're going to have nothing. And the US is going to let us think that they're helping us through all of these steps. But when it comes down to that moment where it's save us, help us get through this or not, they will abandon us as quickly as they did Afghanistan. And it took a lot of talking with my aunt, but I emotionally just could not handle it. I watched all the news and I was in tears and sobbing and on my couch and could not function, because it was just days after IPCC and just days after reading about all these horrible things that especially to be from Pacifica and to have all these climate issues impacting us when we are not the ones who contributed to this mess in the first place. We're going to lose everything we have because people chose money over our lives over and over and over again, generations and generations and generations. And we could have tried to do something about it, but nobody did. And so we're going to get to that point, and then the US is going to be like, well, we can still moor our ships to it. There's still a couple rocks sticking out. It's kind of there. But our future generations are going to be somewhere else, and they're not going to know anything about where we came from. They're not going to ever see the beautiful things we saw. They're not going to understand what it feels like to be home, ever. And that was such a horrifying realization for me. because in my head, even though I am kind of close to 40, like I think I'm young. I feel like there's so much ahead of me. I feel like I should have more optimism than I do, and I don't. And I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, so it's probably going to be a losing fight, but I still want to get my hits in, versus I think I'm going to save something. And that's a horrible thing to realize as well. And so in terms of like bringing people together, so all of us do some sort of work that basically deals with decolonization, whether it's in our professional lives, our personal activism, something, but decolonization touches all of us. And one of the things that like never occurred to me, because my dad taught me these things as like one concept, but my aunt separated them as, you are decolonizing. Are you, while doing this, indigenizing? And one of the issues, because my work has been very recently about the relationship between Native Hawaiians and Micronesians, is when we're building relationships with other people in Pacifica, with other indigenous communities, are we building them rooted in our cultures, in our beliefs, in who we are, and are we building them as, these are our friends, these are our cousins? Or are we building them as transactional relationships, like when Native Hawaiians say, we have to treat Micronesians better because Papa Mau, no, don't treat me well because someone did something for you. Treat me well because I'm a human and I deserve it. Because the whole colonization thing and all of this mess we're in now started because we didn't recognize that in the first place, that it was a transactional relationship and they were treating us this way to get something from us. When I showed up in rural northern Minnesota, I've never been to that part of the United States ever in my life. I did not know what to do. I was just kind of like, here I am. How do I stop line 3? And I was there. I was scheduled to be there for 10 days, and I was there for almost 2 months. And at one point, I was at Red Lake Treaty Camp, and we were just kind of sitting around discussing everything. And I honestly said, and I still mean this now, I would die for Red Lake. And it's not that Red Lake represents something bigger than Palau, than Micronesia in my heart. It's that I was there. And I know what that feels like to have that taken away, or to try to fight to keep it. And so because these are people that I'm interacting with, because this is a community that I've kind of ingratiated myself into, I would die for it because that's the right thing to do. I'm there, and it is a struggle, and it is their struggle, and I'm on that land. And because I care about them, I wouldn't really benefit dying for Red Lake. But I would do it because that is the right thing to do. Not because somehow my family might hear that I did well or that they did something for me in the past. I would do it because it's just the right thing to do. That's what my ancestors would want from me, is to help the people who I'm on their land, I'm here, I'm doing the things, like, of course, go help them. And it's not rooted in any sort of transactional relationship there. It's I am an indigenous person. I understand this. You are going through this. I can help you. Why would I not help you? And so I did a speaking engagement maybe a month ago, and they asked, what does your ideal world look like with everything going on right now? If you could like build that world. And in that world, we're called the global majority for a reason. Like, we're the majority globally. So if we in our communities are decolonizing, but also indigenizing, we're connecting to our roots, but in connecting to our roots, we are connecting to other people, and our relationships are rooted in that. That's where we can change the narrative. That's where we can make those little changes. And maybe we don't save the world, but we get our hits in. We're healing as communities, like within our communities and with other communities. We're healing together as a global majority, and that's what changes. And so that was my little rant, and I just had to get it out there.
Oh yeah, no worries. And yeah, if you have to go, don't worry about it. We're gonna go until we're on indigenous time, So whenever we're done and Comrade Rooster crows, then we're done. No, thank you for that. If you do have to go now, don't worry about it. I know Chris, you have to go a little bit early, but
I
yeah.
can stay for a bit. Yeah, I can
Okay.
stay for a bit longer, so it's not a big deal.
I
Okay.
can do a few more minutes. It's fine.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, that's really important, and like that's why I said like the one time I was like, I know that there are Hawaiians, like, and we have to be like, we have to come clean on this. I just said my own father is like fully supports his own colonizer. I have an aunt who she makes huge amounts of money in the U.S. military. She's more Hawaiian than not. Blood quantum is colonizer method of dividing us, but her heritage is of Hawaii, but she is works for the naval base, the Indo-Pacific Command. She's at the level of like G13, very high up in the military. Huge amounts of money. She owns parts of the island that I'm on. Like just offers. You want to have a nice $10,000 stay in Kona? I can set it up for you. You want anything? I can set it up for you. There's a reason why Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson makes all the movies that he does, because it's it's a very important lesson that we have to remember, which is that the seeds of colonialism, and when the empire conquers us, it doesn't just kill the warriors, the koa. It doesn't just kill the soldiers. It doesn't just take physically land. It takes everything. It takes the culture. It takes history. It takes the past. It takes your ancestors. It takes your language. It takes your soul, and then it makes you into a stormtrooper, or a centurion, as they would in 2,000 years ago, and they're still at it today. And then and that's why I have centurions in my family. One of them is in Dubai, blowing up the sunshine in Afghanistan. I have multiple relatives that have killed people in Iraq, Afghanistan. Because, well, how are you going to make your $1.2 million mortgage in Oahu? And they're just like, I got to survive, I got to become a cop, or I got to join the military. It's or you can be homeless and hang out in Neofeud land, where we're all, eating handfuls of peanut butter, not having a car to get to work in downtown Honolulu, right? Living in next to the meth lab above the highway. That's why I made the game. It's just that's the actual indigenous experience. But that's the current Hawaiian experience, is being obliterated, and so we have to remember. And then that's why I'm like, when my family members come at me with all that, it's very hurtful, because it's like you have to fight your own family. It's incredibly hurtful. But I don't believe I will ever help. I don't think my father will ever give up. He's gonna die soon, probably of COVID-19, in the ghetto that America created for him in Kalihi Valley. That's where they're gonna die. They're never gonna move to the Big Island and try to live cooperatively and hui together on this bits of land that we can get, that we can house without bosses and landlords, as many people as we can. But I have to try. We have to try. And my hope is that the thing that gives me hope is that there are other more successful indigenous civilizations. There's 4 times as many people in one country that have alleviated poverty and stood against the U.S. empire, and is the world's largest trading partner for all the greatest empires, and will defeat the United States ultimately, unless they go to nuclear war. But I don't think they're going to get away with it, because we're going to do too many of these Pacific Islander panels, and everyone in America and Canada will stand up against their empire and stop it. That's what's going to happen. Because there won't be any people left if we don't, because that's what they're doing in the South China Sea right now. That's why Kamala is down there. So it's not really, to my mind, it's not optional. Like, there won't be Palau and there won't be a Hawaii, but there also won't be LA when there's a diesel nuclear submarine firing 15 to 20 warheads that are subdividing from one Chinese missile, wiping off every major city of the United States and Canada off of the face of the earth, which is what the RAND Corporation is currently predicting, is by 2025, the United States must start war in the South China Sea. This is why we're being told absurdities to prepare us for the atrocities. What we must do is, to my mind, is counter all of these continued absurdities, both about our own Pacific and Turtle Island and all the other indigenous peoples, and all of our Asian brothers and sisters. Next week, I'm going to do an Asian and Pacific Islander, all of us, panel. We have to speak as loudly and as interconnectedly, because we are the majority, as possible, and also act as well as we can, because there is no alternative. I mean, climate change, U.S. military is the number one. Just on climate change, you can't deal with unless you deal with the militarism. You want to deal with cooperation, you want to deal with economic inequality, the military enforces global capitalism. You want to deal with anything. We have to we will all be called genocide deniers. We'll be called authoritarian. We'll be called we'll be gaslit. We'll be said shut up. We'll be told all kind of things. You know, we're gonna be called just SJW. I don't know, whatever idpol. We're gonna have everything thrown at us. We have to just like I got called a genocide denier like 10 times yesterday. That's what's gonna happen. Global omnicide will be the result if we fail. That's where you know. I can't live at that level of, you know, like all the times, but we have to. That's always in the back of my mind, you know, because there was a ballistic nuclear missile threat for Hawaii in 2018. David Ige said, everybody take cover in 15 minutes. There will not be a Oahu anymore. You will all be 10 million degree vaporized former humans. People were jumping into the sewers in Honolulu. People were like getting into car crashes on the H1. I hid the phone from Holly. I said, I don't want you to see this. Because that's what happened. It was there was a nuclear missile threat as a clown. Every president is a war criminal and a clown. Was throwing insults with the North Korean leader. They did fire a missile. Thankfully, it didn't hit us. But what we discovered after research is that it took 40 minutes to do an all clear. There is no protection for the Palauans, for the Guamanians, for the people of Okinawa. There's no protection for the people of any of these islands. There is no anti-missile system. We are all vaporized. We're human shields for the white, somewhat human people that they consider human from the empire's perspective. And they also did research. They discovered that there is no defense. The defenses that they're talking about are not sufficient to guarantee our safety. 1 month ago, they held a test and they failed to explode an incoming missile. There is no safety for us in the entire Pacific. What Americans should have, every American should have a nuclear missile threat in California. In your suburb in Vancouver, there should be a nuclear annihilation threat every 15 minutes. Chinese nuclear submarine is firing a missile into the heart of Burnaby right now. Get in the sewer, because they were making fun of us. They were saying, "Oh, the Hawaiians are so silly. Look at them climbing in the sewer. Why are they hugging it? Why are they calling their family on the phone? Oh, they're so silly." Every American should be constantly living under nuclear threat, and be constantly threatened with an actual invasion. They have these bogus war propaganda, but the reality is, if every American was like, Afghanistan is coming to your doorstep in 15 minutes, and every Canadian and every British subject, if everybody had that threat over their head, maybe they'd act a little more and not just like go to sleep after watching Netflix, you know, after reading about the residential school genocide today. One more fact, and I'm gonna throw this at Akemi because I want to get a little bit from Akemi. 70% of the bases in Japan are headquartered in Okinawa, which is less than 1% of Japan's total area. The Okinawan people, it's one of the best kept secrets of the United States. The Okinawan people, the Imperial Japan, which collaborated to annihilate the Okinawan people and ban their language. That's the Japanese, one thing the Japanese don't want to talk about. They actually have majority of their entire land, I think, is like basically military base. They contained COVID similar to the East Asian societies, and they had like 100 cases, 150 cases, and they contained it. The U.S. military is the number one vector of COVID-19 in Hawaii, Guam, the Rim Pack in Hawaii, and then into Okinawa. They said, please, can we have some kind of testing and treatment? Can we just tell us, let us test the soldiers that are entering into Okinawan supermarkets and towns so that we can like try to prevent the U.S. military. The U.S. military has an extraterritoriality exemption. They can go anywhere. They don't have to tell you who has COVID. They're giant petri dishes. Every warship is a giant COVID bioweapon that is being deployed across the world. That's actual biological warfare. They said no. And the Okinawans, 1 out of every 40 had COVID-19. It was a huge epidemic because the military flooded them with their zero testing, zero social distancing military, flooded Okinawa against their will, against the cordon sanitaire. Anyways, so I know that's not a fun thing to jump off of, but Akemi, what did you learn today at the amazing Uchinanchu, which is another name for Okinawa, Uchinanchu Association festival? That's a bad.
I was tuning into that.
Yeah.
I have like bad working memory, so I like took some notes here and there. I did learn Haisai Gusio. I learned that from the festival because there were some people introducing themselves that way. I also learned some other little phrases like Chibariyo. They don't really get into like the military stuff because it's like a happy festival and I have to put on a good face, I guess. But I did. I watched I think you might have linked it, Silver Spook, but Rob Kajiwara had that panel with other folks in Pacific, um, and I also watched Rob Kajiwara's, or I think it was from some other channel, but I learned from Rob Kajiwara one of his tweets about how like mass amounts of Okinawa's water have been contaminated by the U.S. military. And like we don't even know like the extent that it's contaminated because one of the rivers runs through Kadena Air Base, I believe, and we can't have access to like test the waters there. And there was a water source that was like a sacred water source that people would go to like bathe their babies and stuff in, and now it is like contaminated like 45 times the like acceptable range, and I'm just like seething and I don't even know how to process it. Yeah.
The PFOAs, PF.
Yeah, the forever chemicals.
Oh yeah. I have it on screen. Just everybody watching. I have Rob Kajiwara is a very important Okinawan activist. I'm trying to find that panel. I lost the. It was a UN panel from Hawaii, Okinawa, Guam, and a few other places that Rob shared, asking the UN to please intervene. But yeah. Sorry, I'm just like I can't find it. There's a very important panel. I'm gonna go find it and I'll bring it back afterwards. But yeah, I didn't know. To be honest, I knew nothing about Okinawa, and then as I was just until the last few months, in part thanks to Akemi. So it's another incredibly important thing that people should know about as well. Yeah, but
yeah, and I'm still learning. Like I feel very like honored to like be listening to you all and like be on this panel with you all because I'm like very in the early stages of learning about things, and it's so emotionally overwhelming sometimes that it's like hard to even make progress in the studying and the learning.
Anyways, I feel like I took it to we all went to very dark places. So to make it a little happier, in another note, Umurangi Generation sequel, Umurangi Generation. What's next for the great indigenous, technologically advanced Maori people who have the best cyberpunk games? What's next for Umurangi or any other projects you're working on, Yaron?
So for Umurangi Generation, I know Tali, he's got some ideas cooking up at the moment. It's a little bit down the line. As for myself, I'm I think working on some art for the DLC for Umurangi Generation. It sort of inspired me to really cracking in making my own stuff as well. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, but all I can say is there's something cooking.
Excellent. Full disclosure, I have been in talks on and off with Veselikov, also known as Naftali. Umurangi Generation, by the way, won like international game award. So congratulations again on that. And I am in talks with Naftali about possibly working together in future Silver Spook games and Veselikov possible projects to have a more indigenous economic, because it is important that we like, to my mind, that's one thing I have to try to bring up is that we have to build like economic sovereignty on top of asking the political educational sovereignty to that we don't get these narratives stolen from us and our families brainwashed, but then also economic sovereignty. That's part of what we try to do at Silver Spook Games is ask to try to like be able to tell stories that are not gatekept by capitalist Western powers, Hollywood, etc. And so I'm really happy that Umurangi is doing very well, and other projects like this hopefully will be also an alternate place to go for Hawaii. We are being destroyed by COVID and tourism, but tourism is tourism is not necessarily bad in and of itself, but the way it's operated, which is for foreign, commodified fake versions of our culture for mostly for capitalist non-Hawaiian benefit is not helpful. So building like alternate digital storytelling and games, as Dr. Chris was talking about, games and movies. I mean, I really love Reservation Dogs. I'm glad Taika Waititi, who is also Maori and is a co-creator of the show. It's a show that very much, it feels like Neofeud a lot to me, like in the way it's very honest. It's an honest telling of indigenous people stories from indigenous perspective. That's like, yeah, as Taika said, like mostly white people want to see us as riding whales, singing, playing a flute on a mountain, talking to ancestors. But like sometimes we do other things too. Like we make advanced, record-setting movies like Thor Ragnarok, or we just get in our car and drive down the street, and then sometimes we make cyberpunk adventure games. Sometimes we just like listen to TLC and make poor life decisions. And and so like that's something that's like very it humanizes us in a way that a lot of other shows haven't. And so I hope that more of those kind of things can and we need like a variety of like telling honest stories. The current Neofeud 2, what I'm working on is a more I just put out some images of this, but like, Neofeud 2 is looking at, like, this is a screenshot. I threw it into the Discord, where it's like a future where Pacific Islanders and indigenous people, there's not really a specific one, but it's like we have, again, the most advanced technological civilization, where we have cities and we have greenery and we have the water and we have no homelessness. I picture zero homelessness in this city, and as good healthcare system as Vietnam, and as long life expectancies as Cuba, and as little, full, but also technologically advanced, also traveling to the stars, but with our own, Pacific art on the buildings, and like our own, that's kind of what I'm working on. Very much inspired by Umurangi generation. So I just want to, there you go. There's my ad for that's my secret ad for Neofeud 2, and also simultaneously shouting out Umurangi generation yet again. But anyways, if anybody wants to, I know some, if you want to just jump in, we've already kind of covered the main topics, but I feel like, Chris, I wanted to ask you about like sorry, if you want to say something, but I wanted to ask you about the game. What's that? Oh, you gotta go. Okay, if you gotta go, you just say what you want to say. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, you can ask me the question. I'll be happy to. I was about to say something, but go ahead.
Oh, Shaw has to go. Shaw.
Shaw has to go. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did send in an image. So in my grown-up adult day job, I work as the media coordinator for the Indigenous Environmental Network. And this past week, we just released something that's called the Indigenous Resistance Against Carbon Report. So like one happy note that I can throw in is that from the report, grassroots indigenous resistance has stopped or delayed greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to at least 1/4 of the annual US and Canada emissions.
Awesome.
And so we can do the things, but it involves, like the whole like healing ourselves, healing our communities, making sure that our relationships are real relationships and not transactionally based. But like there's hope. And I mean, who doesn't want to get a few hits in when it comes to the US and Canada? Come on now. I'm
always down for not committing violence in a video game, maybe Minecraft, violent.
I mean,
yeah.
There's direct action is a thing, and indigenous grassroots direct action, it gives results. So I will head out on that note, but thank you so much for having me, and you guys have an awesome conversation. I'm going to be tuning in while doing work, but thank you again. Have an awesome evening. See you guys later.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Mahalo Shah, for coming on. I'm going to get that article up on the screen for a second here. So thanks a lot for that. I see Holly's got the link in the chat. Also, thanks. I'm sorry I have not been paying attention to all the raids, but thank you very much to Left Flank Vets, and I'm sorry if I missed other people who have raided in. We're currently having a discussion on Pacific Islanders and decolonization and indigenous peoples of the Pacific. But here's the indigenous resistance disrupts over 3 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually. So that's a very large action and a very, very large impact that we are all collectively having. So awesome. Anyway, yeah. So but I was just gonna ask. So how is you know, because I know, Chris, you teach a game studies, if I'm not mistaken, and so
Yeah.
how do you see that evolving, and how what is the game studies have? What part does that might have that? What I can't make sentences. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm well. I first wanted to like think about that question of Okinawa and a lot of the Asia Pacific when it comes to militarization. And you mentioned tourism, and there's using my work and in my classes, which is militarism, which was a term that was more or less coined by Teresa Tewa, who was a Kiribati and Black feminist and living in Hawaii. But anyway, so that term I think is really useful in a lot of ways because it's always about thinking about how the military and tourism function on similar kind of neo-colonial, infrastructure that one could often presumes the other. You have a tourist infrastructure, you have a lot of usually white people, mainland people who want to be felt secured and safe, and then there's the militaristic complex, right, that backs that up. And I think that's something that we especially see prevalent in Asia, but also in and it feels like that connects to me to things that are going on like with Afghanistan. And I keep mentioning this because again, it's like constantly on my mind. But I think with militarism too, there's often ways of trying to combat the narratives and trying to get the military bases out basically. And like in the Philippines, they still have 20 military bases, I think 20 U.S. military bases, but they've been able to get some out, and part of that is because of the grassroots organizing from people who were showing the violence towards women that was happening around the military bases. Unfortunately, a lot of those places still have about the same rate or similar, but they're owned by the Philippine military now rather than the U.S. military, so it's still an offshoot of any military. But there's still a lot of sexual violence around military bases all over the world, but in the Philippines, there have been instances where they've been able to, democratically, through protests, right, been able to convince senators and people to kick the U.S. out of some of these bases. And same thing in South Korea. When I was living in South Korea back in 2007, it was such a huge issue. They would have signs up that said like no Americans allowed in certain places, especially if you were a soldier, because there was such a high rate of sexual violence by enlisted men, and eventually they did in some ways kick them out of Seoul and in some urban areas, but then and some areas with a lot of heavy sex work, but then move them to areas that just more like in the rural areas, and so they didn't really leave; they just got moved around. Similar in the Philippines, that happened. And I think South Korea still has the largest U.S. military base in the world of like 500 buildings or something like that. But the point I'm trying to make is that there are like battles, right? There's like cultural wars that can be won, that can get these military bases out. And just to kind of jump off what Shah was saying, I think one of the most powerful right now is about climate. Like showing how these military bases are such huge wastes of everything, oil, money, and how much the U.S. does profit off of this. The top U.S. exports are often military products, right? And so this is like, it's a dying empire, right? When the only way we are able to stay alive economically is by producing aircraft and armored vehicles and things like that. Like, it's just so obvious, right? That we need these military bases. We need war. There's that Michael Moore movie, Where to Invade Next. I don't know much about the movie. I like the title because it's very much a way of thinking of the U.S. military is like, okay, Afghanistan is over. Where do we invade next? Because there needs, profit margins have to be made. Halliburton needs to stay in the black, and so on. And so I think that also gives an opportunity because I think it shows that like there are going to be places. You mentioned North Korea, China, all the escalation, and I think that it is really important to just try and get ahead of all that. And using climate change is one reason. And there's a new book coming out that's called like Afghanistan was the first war of feminism, something like that, of white feminism, and the way that people used women's rights, particularly in order to substantiate that war. And so we need to be prepared for those kind of moral battles, right? And they're happening all the time, like you said, with North Korea. Are we just going to let the people in North Korea die of whatever? Are we just going to let the women suffer? There's a superhero kind of guilt that somehow that North Americans always feel like, oh well, if someone's suffering, we have to go in and swoop in, as if that's the way the world works, as if we're not doing that ourselves, as if we're not collaborating with so many other countries that are so much worse to women. But that's the narrative that's going to come out more and more and more, I think, as these escalates. And Biden is trying to continue what Obama started, right, with the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. He wanted to be the Pacific, president, and now I think that's going to be the next focus, like you all are saying. And so it is really important to get ahead of it on a cultural level and on a moral level, to try and emphasize the humanity of the people in these places and the impact on climate. And be able to attack these narratives about feminism too, because they're going to come if they're not already coming full throttle, right? Yeah,
it's a very difficult. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go.
On the note of like militarism and like things happening with that, there was a book that recently came out that I'm making my way through, called Speak Okinawa. That's a memoir by Elizabeth Mickey Brina, I believe. Oh crap, now I lost my page. Oh, okay. And I wanted to read like a little excerpt about when Okinawa was given back to Japan. In 1972, Okinawa reverted, or rather was sold back to Japan for the sum of $685 million. The Okinawans who were skeptical held their breath. The Okinawans who were hopeful celebrated. They sang and danced, they marched in parades and waved Japanese flags. They thought they were done with the U.S. military, done with the bases. The bases remain. Since 1972, nearly 9,000 crimes, including murders by shooting, by stabbing, by strangulation, vehicular homicide, theft, arson, rape, sexual assault, have been committed by U.S. military personnel stationed in Okinawa. 169 court-martial cases for sexual assault, a higher record than at U.S. military bases in any other nation, have occurred in Okinawa. Today, 20% of Okinawan landmass is still controlled by the U.S. military, more land controlled by a foreign military than in any other nation. And just like when I was listening to the audiobook for this initially, and just like sitting there listening to this and like knowing that these things happened and are still happening to like our people and stuff. And I keep I was born in 1995, and I keep like collecting facts of things that happened in 1995. And one of like the not so fun facts is that there was a 12-year-old girl raped by U.S. military personnel in 1995. And that I learned from a song called Nichitu Takara, which means life is a treasure in Uchinaguchi. And the song was made by Megasif, who is an artist and a veteran, and works with like Veterans for Peace and stuff like that, and is especially active in their actions in Okinawa. But yeah. Just wanted to share a bit of that I've learned recently.
Yeah, I did not know any of that. That's for sure. I think I know Okinawans in Hawaii. I just learned this also recently. Hawaii has the largest, one of the, if not the largest diaspora Okinawan communities outside of Okinawa, of course. Peru is another one.
I found the number for it as of like 2008 at least, when Chimugukuru, which is the book that I have over here, was published. This version of it. It was like 40,000, the population of Uchinanshu in Hawaii. So pretty cool. And yeah, there's a large population also in Peru and Bolivia and Brazil.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I do have a fact that I remember that I learned from watching the Okinawan festival showing,
Yeah.
and they had someone that they were like live talking with in Argentina, and Argentina has like a really big I guess like Uchinanshu population also, and they were showing their I think it was like the building that they have like all their events in and stuff, and like do classes and things like that. And it's like 3 stories tall, and they had like some kids there, and everyone was masked up, and they were practicing sanshin, and that just like gave me so much hope, knowing that there's like Shinanchu that like from youth like are in touch with their culture and like don't have to wait like 25 years to find out all this and like have to start have a late start to like learning, like a lifetime of learning. That was really nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I go ahead.
So there were a couple thoughts that I had been lingering on since Shah was talking about solidarity between indigenous peoples, and also I guess a little bit of video game talk as well. But is learning about the proper meaning of a value that we have here in Polynesia, maybe in the rest of the Pacific as well, is the concept of mana. In video games, it's often seen as like a magical stamina bar, but it's more about authority and how it exists in the people, and also how relations exist between people. Um, it's for some Māori here. It's like it's understood that having mana means having power over others, but like an actual like to me a real test of mana is not the possession of power or strength or whatever, but more about the giving of it. What are you giving to everyone else? And yeah, I think that's been a lot of something that's been really important here, because in between tribes there's been a lot of intertribal conflict, and so there's a lot of hard feelings there. But the mana of people who may have been your tribe's enemies in the past, being able to actually have them being actually able to give something, giving through work, through being active in defense of land, like how at the moment there is currently an occupation in a small island just off the coast of Auckland here. They're attempting to build a marina on a spot where an endangered species of penguin currently. They usually go there to lay eggs and stuff. And they're currently trying to build a marina there, and that's going to be blocking off those penguins, and those penguins are going to go extinct as a result. But yeah, we've got people occupying the place, people like trying to hold off the construction because of lockdown. Thankfully, where the construction there is halted. But they're still trying. They're trying anything they can. I remember just recently the police here, they tried to arrest the people who are occupying the place for supposedly breaking COVID rules. They haven't, but they were utilizing the power that they gained during our COVID lockdowns to try and quell the occupation there. Whether it's worked, I'm not sure yet, but yeah, without like a proper understanding of mana and stuff like that, it's also causes a lot of rifts even within tribes here. Like the tribe that that island, you know, the people that belong to that island, they are even having disagreements over this as well. And like the construction began because they got the opinion of one person from that from the iwi authority to sign over permission to build there, but they never consulted anyone else. No one ever heard of it until the construction started, and so it's been a bit of a hard fight there.
Yeah, I remember what is that? Ihu Matao, here on the Big Island.
Oh yeah. Just in South Auckland, there's a region there next to the airport, where a building company had been trying to for years to build a new subdivision there, but the people of the area have been very firm in saying no, you're not building any houses here. Also, the land that you bought was not yours to purchase in the first place. It's been kind of an unfortunate thing where for some other places where they've tried occupation, they've had to resort to buying the land from the thieves. which has been very sad. But it's yeah, these days people are very, very tired. It's been a lot. There's been a lot of fighting, and the success has been mixed.
Yeah, just on that one thing you said about the buying the land back, the United States military is currently paying $1 for 23,000 acres of Big Island, Oahu, multiple islands of ours. The place, the Pohakuloa training facility, where speaking of human rights violations in Afghanistan, one thing people might not know is that they practiced bombing the Uyghurs that America, again, trying to get people to cry for these people that are horribly hurt and forced labor and all these stories. Those same people were bombed by the United States in eastern Afghanistan. In 2018, the single largest day of bombing in Afghanistan was of Uyghurs, and they practiced that bombing with B-52A strata fortresses on the Big Island of Hawaii at Pohakuloa training facility. Also, that's a staging ground here in Hawaii. It was the staging ground for Iraq. It was the staging ground for Vietnam. One thing we have to keep in mind too is they like to break this narrative up into there's each of these countries are distinct, but the Afghanistan people, they are actually Asians, you know. So when they talk about Asian hatred, that actually is part of it. And again, Hawaii was the place that they bombed, and the bombs they dropped during the 2019 Mauna Kea actions, which we were part of here, to stop a multi-billion-dollar mega project on our mountain against United Nations, again, in flagrant violation of United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, et cetera, et cetera. They dropped 15,000 pounds of C4 equivalent bombs on the mountain while we were up there. Also flew Black Hawk helicopters over the elders' tents. The bombs itself, that's enough desecration. That's toxifying the water supply. There's toxic chemicals in the munitions that they use, and also it was a kind of a threat, and also it was just about psychological warfare, keeping up 70-year-old Hawaiians at night trying to defend their own legitimate territory. It was similar to the Ihu Matao, the Maori people that were trying to defend that area. We had sympathetic demonstrations there. Jason Momoa and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I mean, to Dwayne, I threw a little shade at Dwayne, but to his credit, he did show up on Mauna Kea and then went on to like The View, CNN, MSNBC, and 25 other shows. He did raise visibility at least for that action on Mauna Kea. And Jason Momoa said, Aquaman 2 is not happening. There won't be any Aquaman 2 because I'm going to get bulldozed by one of your American trucks, and then I'll be dead. So there won't be So if you build this TMD, I mean, that's a major threat. How is America going to manufacture consent for a war in Asia to replace Afghanistan if they can't make any more Marvel movies? Big conundrum. I guess they have to do all video game all the time. Anyways, but yeah, so I just wanted to tie that up. But that is where they actually flew the bombers to hurt and kill. Like, again, kind of weaponizing people's empathy against their own interests, and definitely in the interests of those who America is making war on, the empire is making war on. So yeah, that's another case. Rob Kajiwara, tying this back to Okinawa, also recently brought up, where are all of the crying Americans for all of the poisoned Okinawan children? Where's all your empathy there? Why are you out for Yeonmi Park, who gets $50,000 to go on Joe Rogan and CNN and MSNBC and every left, right, and center media? And the South and America will pay $860,000. That's the going rate to defect from North Korea and talk about the rats that you ate. $860,000. That will almost buy you a house in maybe like a little few hours out of Vancouver, maybe in the outskirts of LA, if there's anything that isn't burnt by wildfire. That's how much you get to make people cry for a place that has resisted imperialism, that has actually universal healthcare, or is trying to resist, and America wants to bomb back into the Stone Age. So we have to always keep that in mind, and so that's why I came up like, how come I can get on? We can get on these streams, and anybody who subbed, thank you for all the subs. I'm sorry I'm missing them all. I can make maybe $10 or $20 saying true things for one night, and Naira, some Syrian PR firm trained war propaganda 16-year-old can say stuff about chemical weapons in Syria. Or Yami Park can say stuff about North Korea and get $50,000 for an hour on Joe Rogan. Well, where's my $50,000? Anyway, that's why I'm gonna invent a socialist country. I'm gonna say in socialist Hawaii, we have no electricity and no trains. Never mind the fact that we had better trains and electricity before America. We have no electricity, so we all have to push the train up the mountain. And if we don't in the socialist Hawaii, we have authoritarian kahuna. If we don't sacrifice a capitalist every day to authoritarian kahuna, then we get whippings. And please America, please save socialist Hawaii. I want $50,000. Can I just make up a Pacific Island country and come on to Joe Rogan and CNN? Can I go talk to Wolf Blitzer and get $50,000? BBC, I'm gonna make up a socialist country. Okay, can I come on your garbage rag and you're gonna publish articles for all the liberals to read? No, I'm just being facetious, but nobody knows where to take that, so I'm just gonna say, what do you all think of what's the answer to Captain America? Are you happy for Captain America 4, or when are we gonna have Captain Pacifica? You know what I'm saying?
I can't watch any of these superhero movies anymore. I have a 4-year-old son, and someone bought him a Marvel shirt, and I just threw it away. I can't deal with any of it anymore. I just can't. I don't think we need heroes like that, and especially that are just white men, but really any men that are just kind of held up to get heroified in those ways is just really alarming to me. Yeah, because I feel like this is kind of going back to what I was saying before a bit about the success of militarism, why we all seem to trust. The military is still the most trusted state institution by far of any other U.S. State institution. And you get this in almost every Hollywood film, right? If something's wrong with the military, it's because some politician did something stupid, and it's never the military's fault, right? They're always the ones who know what they're doing. And of course, that's from a very American perspective. You couldn't live in an occupied country really and have that perspective. But it just shows the limitations of these films, right? That the superheroes are the police, or they are the world police, they're policing in some. Oh, there's that crow, that rooster. But yeah, I feel like that's just someone I got my PhD in literature originally. And it was always, we're taught to think about the form, not just the content, and so you can change the face of the person who's the superhero. But if they're still just defending the status quo and capitalism and this white supremacist state, they could still be an Asian person, they could be a Black person still doing the same thing. And I feel like that really limits our imaginations. It's not just that, imagining an Asian person as a superhero is the best we can get right now. That's kind of far out there for some of these companies and some of these folks, and it's just not far out. It just tells me how limited people's imaginations are. That's really the best that people can think of, in Hollywood and in games too, right? There's such a fidelity to U.S. empire and to American military. And that's really, really hard to break with. And I feel like in games that I work through and look through with my students, it's almost like you have to be able to try and reread them in weird ways. I have this part of Open World Empire that's about Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, and how one of the main level designers, identifies as Persian, Iranian, Muhammad Alavi. And if you look at his levels, just his level design, and you accept that this level was made by a Persian guy, it plays very differently, and so some of the levels, for example, there's No Russian is one of the ones that he created. You could play through just that one level and think of it in a very different way if you think of it as this is authored by a Persian guy, but of course, the people who play Call of Duty don't usually think too much about the main narrative or the level design. They just think they just go right to the multiplayer and want to shoot each other. But those things are in there, and I feel like with games, part of what is hard about dealing with them is that we don't really know how to read them. People don't really take classes on how to understand games and where they're coming from and the kind of funding and things like that and corporate nonsense that goes into them. in the way that we are taught to read literature and even films in some ways. And so it just becomes acceptable that like you can have a video game where you're just someone in the military killing off scores of brown people, and people think, oh, it's just a video game. Like, let's just, let it be what it is. That's just what it is. But if we had, higher standards, I imagine my utopia is actually where we have really high standards for the things that we consume. And we, and that every time a Call of Duty game comes out, people are just protesting and saying, like, this is clearly ideological bullshit propaganda. We're not going to deal with it, instead of just saying, oh, it's a video game, let it be what it is. Because and then people will call us too sensitive and things like that. But that's the only way we can really change how we think of, how we imagine ourselves and how we think of what it is to be a good person. Because right now, like, I feel like all my students especially, but also a lot of just men I know, their version of being a good person is fighting a battle against something, and they can't think differently about that. I think that's incredibly sad. And so even if we start talking about like indigenous politics, they want to be on the front line and like battle something. I'm just like, that's not really how it works, like you do not want to actually like go out and just start attacking anyone. Like that's but I don't know what to tell them, but just like stop watching Marvel movies for God's sakes. Like stop playing these particular video games. Like it's just not the only way of being a good person. Yeah. That's how I feel about games too. And I do have to go.
Oh yeah, no worries. No worries.
Yeah. Take care.
Yeah, if you want to say anything else about where you want to your shout outs or anything else, or if you just gotta go, no problem. But
no, I'm good. I just said everything I wanted to say.
Oh, okay. All right. Awesome. Hey, thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming on, Kavika. And I look forward to working with you in the near future as well.
Yeah. I look forward to more conversations with all of you. Thanks.
Okay. Aloha. I just wanted to say just something I picked up. There was a quote off of what Chris just said, which is one thing I want to say is like I go on at least probably 1 to 3 references to why you shouldn't play Call of Colonialism or watch superhero movies. I have entire songs and characters in video games that are just about why, there's a song Captain Eutropia that I made just about why all of these terrible superhero movies are really creating bad things in our cultures. But anyways, one quote I wanted to say, I just thought this popped in my head. We're talking about how like American military is and militaries generally, but especially the U.S. military is not doing anything. There's no recognition of the problems of when they're just killing scores of brown people in a country America wants to make war on. I was looking up StarCraft. This is like an ancient millennial game. I think Akemi, you might have been born when I was like before I was even while I was playing this. You might not have actually been around yet, but anyways, it's an ancient antediluvial, like before Y2K in 2000s game. But in StarCraft, there's something that somebody said about it. It's a game that's kind of like there's the human, there's the Zerg, they're like an alien xenomorph like race, and then there's like a Protoss advanced like a Vulcan-ish sort of race. But somebody made this quote. Somebody had this quote. I forget where it's from, but they said, somebody asked, "Are the Zerg evil?" Right? And then somebody said, "The Zerg aren't evil. This in the original StarCraft, their only interests were to evolve and to conquer. There was no morality whatsoever attached to their doings." Right? So it's kind of like suggesting, what it suggests to me, just as it's just kind of like, and then it was just accepted, which is that conquering has no moral valence to it, right? Imperialism, colonialism, these are just like natural things that happen, right? This is, you hear this argument sometimes. Well, I mean, you guys, indigenous people, you got conquered. We won fair and square, just that's it. That's there's no morality to it, residential schools, that we just conquered you and you lost. So you got genocided, that's just a normal, natural thing in the world, is to just go around and exterminate millions, if not billions of people and take all their stuff. That's just a normal thing. That's part of the exceptionalism. But if like, Captain America's like, I don't know, girlfriend gets hurt, then that's like a human rights crisis. We got to go do something about that, especially if it's a North Korean girlfriend or a Cuban girlfriend or an Afghani girlfriend. Anyway, that's me throwing shade. But I'm not sure exactly where to take this. I understand not everybody wants to comment on StarCraft, but I just thought that was interesting. A little bit of just illustrating what Chris was saying. Akemi, what is your favorite game or movie?
Oof, I don't play a lot of games, although I've helped like make two for like classes and stuff back in college. But I wanted to go back to the question of like the heroes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like I also don't watch a lot of superhero movies, and I sadly fell asleep during one of the Spider-Man movies once. And like a lot of things in like pop culture that a lot of people grew up with, like I don't have like a real connection to.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was like rediscovering my Uchinanchu heritage this past year, I was reading about like spiritual beliefs and stuff of Luchu, and ancestor worship is like a really big thing. And the past 25 generations are like people that you can honor by name and things like that. And like beyond 25 generations is like your ancestors that are now part of the land, which is like makes it all the more horrifying, like variations of that word, like having just bases built over like your ancestors. And whenever I like feel weak or scared or something, like I found myself like thinking more and more and like calling upon more and more my ancestors, because like and elders too. In that one, in the panel that Rob did, there were I think two Luchuans, and one or both of them like survived the Battle of Okinawa, which during the Battle of Okinawa, it's estimated that like between a quarter to a third of Uchinanchu perished. And that was from like, and I believe that was more than the U.S. and Imperial Japan armies combined, and most of those were Uchinanchu civilians, children, and we were also like kind of like brainwashed, I guess, by Imperial Japan, in that like first we were like kind of made losing my words, but they let Okinawa be like take on the U.S. Army while they like gathered to protect the mainland, and there were like caves built for the Imperial Army that were dug out by Okinawan slave labor. And this is something that I learned from, I think I mentioned to you, Silver Spook, that early in my college career when I was studying Japanese, trying to reconnect with what I thought at the time was my Japanese heritage, because that's what I grew up believing, is that I was half Japanese. And then finding out that during the war, like those caves were built, and then whenever American soldiers were coming by, they would push the Okinawans out in front. The Imperial soldiers would push the Okinawans in front to take the blunt of bombings. And just like whole families probably perished that way, and like whole families probably perished, and whole lineages like just gone. And so like when I think of like heroes or needing strength or courage, I think about like all the ancestors and our relatives and stuff that like have survived these atrocities and like live to tell the truth. And I just hope to have like an inkling of the strength that they had to be able to like continue and like perpetuate the culture and the history and carry on their strength. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Oh no, totally. And I want to say a few things, and then I'm gonna let Yaron say anything that you want. We're gonna probably end in about like 10 minutes or so, because like about 6, because it will be about 2 hours. But I want to say thank you to Lost Sue, very good educator. Speaking of somebody who is like relives an incredible amount of trauma, personally experienced every time Lost Sue gets up and speaks. Lost Sue is a great educator from so-called Canada, indigenous person. You should definitely be. I think most people here are probably already following. If not, very important indigenous educator and survival of the 60s scoop and the Canadian historical and ongoing genocide against the indigenous peoples there. And also, Jamtoon, thank you for the subscription. I'm sorry I'm missing a lot of people's subscriptions and raids, but I'm trying to focus. But thank you so much. We greatly appreciate it, and I hope people are learning something. That's why we're doing this. And so Akemi, I want to say Akemi's this was Akemi's what's that? This is Akemi's first official first like a panel appearance. I just want to say thanks for having the courage to come out there, because I know it's a lot. I know it's not easy to talk about all this very painful stuff.
Literally, when you first asked me, I was like panicking. I was like thinking through all like the possibilities of what could happen and stuff. And then like when I sat down and I was like, would my ancestors want me to do this? I'm like, fuck yes. And from then it was like simple, like of course.
Yeah, no, totally. That's what I always think. I'm like, oh, should I say this? Should I put this? Should I make this thing in this game that's gonna piss off people and I might not make as much money because I'm gonna anger a lot of settlers, and I'm not gonna get published by Activision or something, And then I go, what would my ancestors want? We couldn't say anything and we all died. We were burned. Or so, what they would say, like, of course you have to absolutely say this. Because and also all the kids that I work with and I watch, it's kind of like we do owe it to all those people that can speak. Every time I speak, for every Silver Spook, there's 10,000 other Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, Asians, poor people from their place that I'm from. They can't speak because they're not alive anymore. They died in the police violence, gang violence, the violence of poverty, the food desert. They're in prison in Arizona. A lot of them mechanically separating chicken. I'm not joking about that, but it's where Hawaii sends a lot of prisoners. And so, anyways, so we have to. It is our duties, I think, to do our best, within our limits, of course, but we try our best. Anyways, but Yaron, anything else? Like, one thing that just a random thing to throw it out there. I've been looking at the Hawaiian and the Pacific. Art and patterns. I remember this is one thing that I was kind of studying, was there are a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of similarities in the language and in the words. And the mana, when you're talking about mana too, I was thinking about that. I was like, oh yeah, mana is it's not the thing that you just need to cast magic missile to beat up on some orcs, in a racist token colonizer game. But mana has a meaning in Hawaiian as well that's similar. And some people interpret it as power. The mana in the like the EV bones of have mana, but also the thing you're saying about how like mana is not what it's not like if I have a very large nuclear missile then I have a lot of mana. That's what America thinks it means, or the ability to cast meteor showers. Mana it comes from like I think if you in our culture we are about like doing, as Sha was saying, for all people. Right, hooing together. Aloha. We have values. Aloha aina. Right, the love of the aina, and the kuleana, our responsibility. Pono, righteousness and justice. And so those who fulfill their responsibility to all of the people, the Kanaka Maoli, and also the land that is the mother, they should have great mana. And so hoarding lots of stuff, like I don't know, Bill Gates, or having lots of weapons and bombs. That's a very Western conception of what is power, and anyway, I'm just kind of running off of that, but yeah.
This actually reminds me of I forget where this quote specifically comes from. It was this young politician or something who was writing back to the British mainland about the natives of this New Zealand, and the quote goes something like this. The natives of this place are a strange and terrible people. They measure the worth of a man not by what he has, but by what he gives away. It is clear if we are to civilize them, we must teach them greed.
Oh my, they actually said that. We must teach them greed.
Unfortunately, they did well in some aspects of that. Yeah, there are some tribes where greed is the the that's how the game goes at the moment. I hope we can pull away from that, but yeah, I remember hearing that. I was horrified. I'm just like, God, they really weren't quiet about what they wanted to do with us.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm like Sue and I. We talk a lot about this in the Turtle Island. It's like, if you, for all the people who are like, I don't know about land back. I don't know about this. They want it all back. I don't know. Unsettling. But like, the thing is, like, the people who think those kind of things, like, we have to teach them how to be landlords, so we can have a tiny number of people, making a lot of people homeless and then underhoused and being threatened with homelessness. Because otherwise, if they don't learn that, or we have to either wipe them out, or we have to kill the Indian, save the man, right? And I think it's the same. I think it's the same thing for the Maori and for the Hawaiian, as in the people in Turtle Island. And so, when you really think, that's what we mean. We don't mean like everybody's, we don't want your toothbrush, right? We don't want to come take all your stuff, but we want everybody to have the things that they need. It's like the luau, as I often bring up, luau, the Hawaiian concept of luau. It really means it's the ritual of where the people who produce bring collectively all the food, everything that they have, to all be cooked together, and it's distributed by need. The keiki, the children and the elderly and the less able, or the sick, the people who can't move, are fed by those that are more able, the 20 to 40-year-olds that are very able to do things. So people who talk about all these struggles that are currently the Western people, even white settlers who are like, oh my goodness, I'm in Canada and I'm like, I can't get even basic healthcare because I have like a vision problem, I have a feet problem, even with the kind of like not very good healthcare system that isn't so universal there. They're not even in America. They're like, I wish I'm being treated like I'm a subhuman because I can't produce enough wealth for rich billionaires, and so that means that I don't count as a person anymore. And so, like, really, for those people that need help, want healthcare, that's the way that Hawaiians operate and indigenous people operate. You people who want housing, people who are like, I can't get access to secure housing and I'm being evicted with millions of people right now in America. Decolonization means nobody worrying about that ever again. There was no homelessness in again 1800s Hawaii, that one I was talking about earlier. That was not a problem. Universal healthcare. This is just what we did. And the thing about Hawaii, see, I think like it's like interestingly, like in Hawaii there was this we did call it King Kalakaua. We had Queen Liliuo Kalani. We had they were called kings and queens. But it doesn't really translate exactly. Ali'i, the word that means like the leader, it really means something closer to steward. But in order to just stop being totally taken over and then, fully converted into, being taught greed, as these colonists were saying, we said, well, no, look, we're just like you. We're civilized. We have Christianity. We have palaces. We have 21 gun salutes for our country. We have a flag. Look at this beautiful flag. It even has a Union Jack in it. Look, aren't we civilized? But actually we were doing socialism. But we didn't call it that, because if you said, well, we're doing that socialism thing, they would say, well, these Hawaiians, they're not civilized. They need to be taught greed. Anyway, I just had that thought. I hear the Okinawans also have, Uchinanchu also have Yui Maru, which means something similar to.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. There's a documentary, I believe, on YouTube. I don't know if just the title is Longevity, but it's about like how there's a lot of centenarians in Okinawa. And one of the people that they were talking to talked about one of the concepts, Yui Maru, how like she was describing it, and she's like, one day, like, sometimes we'll all get money together, and then like each month whoever needs it, like, we'll give it to them, and then, like, for example, if someone needs like uniforms for school or something, then that person like needs the money that month, so they give it to them. And then also with things like crops and stuff, going like from, okay, today we all go to this family's house and we help them like gather all their crops and stuff, and then tomorrow we're gonna go to this person's house and help them gather all their crops and stuff, and just like going around like in a circle, maru. And I think I need to look into it, but I think mana also exists in Ichinaguchi at least. I know there was another word that I saw called mabui, which is like life force, but it's like different. But yeah, I wanted to bring that one up. And I'll leave you with one more word, Chimugukuru, which is the title of one of my books there. Means like the spirit of compassion is how it's described, and Chimu means heart. I'm not sure what Gukuru means, but yeah, and I think Chimu is the word is Na'au, the word for like heart, or like heart of the
I think so.
The stomach of the heart type of thing.
Yeah, in Hawaiian, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For us, the word is ngako.
Cool.
Yeah. One thing I noticed just off of that, and then I'll let you guys, because we got to get off shortly. But I wanted to say, there's so many connections when I was studying, like to work on this. Back to this, like just not to shout my game out again, but when I was working on this advanced civilization, that was just one of the another image that I have is the one of it has King Kamehameha, the one that's behind this Pacific Islander. This is kind of a concept art for Neofeud 2, the thing that's behind all of our faces there, and it was while I was studying, like to try to figure out like what does an indigenous future look like? Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll. What does it look like to be to not be living under the thumb of colonialism, and to fully express who we are, and fully be out of this kind of ongoing siege economically, linguistically, historically, in terms of our educations, etc. What does that look like? And I was like, when I'm looking at all the words, like even all the way back into Asia as well, there's so many connections. And like I remember Vas Atali was like, what is the word for red sky? What does umurangi mean in Hawaiian? And I didn't know at the time, but I looked it up and I was like, this is like so close. This is almost like, and I realized like part of it is that I was looking at Hawaiian translations by the French, Hawaiian translations of the Hawaiian language by French transcribers. Of course, it's OUI. It's French have their own weird clusters of vowels with an X in them to make. I don't quite understand why they do this, but anyways, English is has like more exceptions than rules, really. But the way that they would transcribe the words, like depending on who was doing it, a Puritan Calvinist, for example, who did a lot of the first Hawaiians, they cut out in the Hawaiian language, they cut out the T and the R, like Tangaroa and Kanaloa means something very very similar as far as I can figure it out. They cut out the anything with the B and lots of other consonants. But I think I don't have full receipts on this, but I've listened to actual, and the way that the Russians, my friend Adam Kiave, or a very good educator, I don't know him personally, but he's a Hawaiian historian. The Russians have their own, Kamehameha, when he came, they transcribed it as Tameamea with a T. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of, now of course, this doesn't make all of what we know of Hawaiian is necessarily wrong, but it means that because we didn't have the written language, a lot of this is actually even closer than we even recognize, and it is highly probable, if not extremely probable, that we were constantly trading, and the languages were we probably had our own indigenous variations and our own local peculiarities and local gods, etc. But the language is so close, and probably all the way up to even. I don't have all the evidence for this, but it's pointing to more and more, and also where foods like the potato are and have been for what period of time. Only through routine trade and travel could this really have occurred over such a period of time. Anyway, that's just a random thing I'm just kind of thinking about. That's part of where I'm like, we're advanced and also mostly peaceful. There was not zero battle, but it was not constant warfare, which is why in Hawaii we had 80 to 100 year lifespans. You don't have that if you're constantly at war, like in Europe, right? Where everybody's constantly fighting for a king or a lord. Anyways, so I think that this kind of peaceful coexistence, with occasional struggle, disagreement that were often resolved. There's a legend in Hawaii. One more is Kamapua'a, the pig, the pig god, and then Pele, the volcano goddess, had a disagreement. They had a relationship, and then they had a falling out. And sometimes that would cause wars, Helen, Henry, kings in the Europe, if they had disagreements with other leaders, just bad relationships would cause entire thousands of people to die, etc. Right? But in Hawaiian, the reason why you throw pork, there's a thing that people still do to this day, where they take pork, like you have kalua pig or you have some kind of bacon when you're driving over this particular mountain ridge, the ko'olas. You throw the pork out, right? But part of that is because of this thing where you don't bring kamapua'a, you don't bring the pig, right, to the Pele's side of the mountain, of the island, the leeward side of Oahu. And so, anyways, but part of that is it's both mythological. It's like it talks about the value system. It talks about history. It talks about our gods, and it also talks about the nature, biology, that are all kind of wrapped up together. But it also is kind of a story of when there are disagreements, right, and large violence could break out. We separate. We kind of like take those people that can't get along together, and we try to have nonviolent solutions, to these problems, and rather than, the history of violence in some other parts of the world is much more everywhere, right? But the colonizers like to say, you guys are just all throwing spears at each other every other day. You guys are just killing each other left and right. We just helped you out there. That's what they'll say. But I think that's anyway, I've been going off on that for a little bit. So if anything else you guys want to say, anything else you guys want to add, you can take as long as you want. There's not like a time limit, but anything else you haven't got to say at any point, feel free to say whatever you want to say.
I can mention that, like, you mentioned like the different alphabets and stuff. In Japan, I've been referring to Okinawa and the Okinawan archipelago as Luchu, which is like the name that was originally given to us by China, I believe, who like first found us, and we were just hanging out and chill. We didn't really have a name for ourselves because we were just like living. But they found us and they named us Luchu, and I believe that means like easygoing people or something of the sort. So I think that's nice. But it's in Japan and often it's referenced as Ryukyu or the Ryukyu Kingdom because in Japan there's no like L. In Japanese there's no L sound, so it's changed to R. Yeah, so that's interesting related tidbit. Yeah.
Speaking of names, it's sort of a similar deal here. Captain Cook had come here. He already had a translator from Tahiti, so he actually had a way of communicating with us. And, when he asked, what are you people? We said, He tangata Maori aho, which quite literally means we are the normal people. Because we're called Maori as a people, but in truth that word simply just means like a regular mortal or like a normal regular something. Like, for instance, the word for freshwater is Waimaori, meaning, well, normal water as opposed to salty water. And I think another thing I just wanted to mention as well, Silverspook, you were talking about the Hawaiian kingdom and stuff like that. I believe that chiefs during the mid to late 1800s, they had seen the success of Hawaii and whānau up there, and they kind of wanted to emulate it, and so there was the birth of the Maori King movement. We still actually have like somewhat of a Maori king. His power is very symbolic and not really recognized. But yeah, it was we had seen the success of the whānau up north and had attempted to emulate that success, but it seems that with Britain they were just like, no, we can only be friendly with one brown people at a time. Sorry.
Oh my goodness, that sounds very yeah. I did not know that. That's good to know. I had not heard about that one. The King movement. Was that to is the word ali? Does that have an equivalent in the?
Yeah. In Maori the word is ariki, which is same deal. The king sometimes also, like in Maori we say kingi, or sometimes they'll be referred to as ariki nui, or just an even greater ariki. Yeah, so very, very similar word. Ariki, rangatira is the other one. although that's more so for like localized like hapu or sub-tribes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's any consolation, under Britain, we might have, we part of it was like, I just want to show this one more time since we're talking about it. I don't like to put it up on the wall because it's, people are like, why do you have a Union Jack on your wall? But this is the Hawaiian, this is the official Hawaiian Kingdom flag with the Union Jack inside there, right? That's Mother Britain watching most benevolently over the little natives in their little, in their very advanced rail and their electrical civilization. But the reason why there's a Union Jack is because of that. Because if we hadn't done that, something I also learned, Vietnam identifies themselves, kind of tying back to the present. Vietnam identifies itself as a neutral country in the family of nations under the UN, as they have no military bases in their country, no foreign military bases, no military alliances. So they're not allying with the United States against China, China against the United States, Britain or any other, Philippines or anyone. They're neutral. The concept of neutrality was apparently pioneered or invented by the Hawaiians in this time in the 1800s. It didn't exist prior to that. And so that same concept, this was in that same panel that Akemi was talking about, the Pacific Islanders. It was brought up by one of the Hawaiian representatives that that whole using diplomacy. There's a lot of Swiss actually that like of the few colonizer professors, like one was a Swiss consul, and he said that the Hawaiians were the greatest diplomats that he had ever heard of, because they survived somehow not being completely subsumed and had like their independent country at parity with European countries in a time in which this is a time in which when the any brown or black people, like these indigenous peoples, they were not considered people basically. And so the Hawaiians, how they managed to get accepted, part of it was making concessions, like calling it king, putting the Union Jack in your flag, right? Having these appearances. They wanted British Christians. The first Ka'ahumanu, the one of our early ali'i, was like, we would like British Christians so we could have the Christianity as part of seeming civilized, right? That's what Europeans internally use that. The French even used that against Protestants inside of France, civilizing missionaries to crush their own Huguenots. But so we wanted British specifically. They sent American Calvinists, and they're not happy about that because America was more of a backwater at this time. But if it's any consolation, today I think that the Maori, I don't want to say like they're not better, but they have achieved somehow a great degree of sovereignty, independence, and have been great teachers, like I already said, right, at the university. Not that there aren't great Hawaiian activists and teachers and members of our nation, but for whatever reason, I think somebody said that the Maori were one of the last in the colonization process, and so that. Also the kind of remoteness and the location of it. Hawaii, part of the reason why we were, is because of its prime location as a place to make war and colonize Asia. And so, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a cold comfort, but for Maori, we didn't experience perhaps the levels of colonial violence that was faced by First Nations over in North America, because around about the time that people started settling here was when opinions about colonization within the empire were starting to turn a different way. So it's like, yeah, we were subjected to a lot of violence and a lot of horrible stuff, but we missed out on the worst of it. Yeah, and so it's like a very cold comfort in that regard.
Yeah, it doesn't really help when you're it's not a lot better. But yeah. Anyways, I feel like I want to end on something positive, so I'm gonna say I think that like number one, like I don't know if we need a Polynesian superhero, but or Pacific superheroes or but I feel like we do need more definitely more games. And if there's one thing, the games and movies and all the art and graphic novels. Solomon Enos is another Hawaiian artist. Actually, fun fact, I was gonna work with. There was a point in Kalihi somewhere in 2004. There were Hawaiian graphic artists the people who pioneered bullet time, from the Matrix. Anybody know what the Matrix is? The people who worked on the Matrix, special effects artists, including many of them are Hawaiian, moved back to Hawaii, and we were working with Solomon Enos, who's a great artist, Hawaiian, a painter, did some really incredible stuff. Also inspired some of my stuff as well. We're gonna have a cyberpunk, like Hawaii Pacific centered Matrix like world. It was called like Black Sand Hawaii. It was gonna have it was a multi-thousand-year spanning sci-fi cyberpunk thing where there was like, the sea levels rise, but the Hawaiians are like still surviving, and they're interconnected with this anti-imperialist global network. And there was TV shows, there were graphic novels, there were movies, there was open, like, the Matrix Online. Imagine that, but like indigenous centered in the 2000s. And there was this. I was a part of this project at one point. But anyways, it was like this amazing, like, imagine like Avengers in the cinematic universe, right? But like not backing colonizer empires in the militaries, right? I mean, it was something that I kind of wish it had happened, but historical reasons, all the money in America said, well, we don't want to make movies about in 2000s indigenous people decolonizing themselves in peace and stopping the empire. Why would we make those? We're not going to give you any funding for that. So anyways, Taika, call me. No, I do think that there's very much a lot of room. I hope Umurangi Generation and whatever projects you are working on with Holly and everyone else continues to develop, and other people. I hope Reservation Dogs is renewed for season 2, so that's good news. And yeah, I think that's a hopeful place to lead from. But yeah, any closing thoughts as we kind of finish up there?
I guess I wanted to just add, if you ever need someone else contributing any art for any projects you're working on, I'm happy to help.
Oh, right on. I'll definitely.
That's what I do.
Yeah, everybody should definitely. Everybody that has been on the panel. I'll try to get everybody's. Holly, I have everybody's tags up there, so be sure to follow everybody here on this panel for more about their projects and their art and other things that they can share. Yeah, Yaron does. Did you do the art, all the art for Umurangi, or how?
Not all that. I was like a contributing artist for like graffiti on the walls and things like that.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I really like the graffiti, like the mountain. I can't remember the name of the mountain off the top of my head.
Moao.
Yeah. All the graffiti really makes the world feel like very lived in and very real, and also you learn a lot about indigenous culture in Aotearoa and geography. So it really does enrich the whole experience. And so so definitely we'll keep in touch about that, and be sure to follow everybody. Yeah, totally.
If you have at 2 a.m. 2 a.m. my time. I'm not sure what time it'll be in Hawaii, but the Hawaii United Okinawa Association that's been hosting the Okinawan Festival this weekend, virtual Okinawan Festival for the second year. They're doing like a bon dance stream at 2 a.m. my time. It's in a little under 2 hours. If you search up Hawaii United Okinawa Association on YouTube, you should be able to find it. And then tomorrow they're also having a day 2 stream from in Eastern time. It's 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. So you can also find that there. It's been really nice to be able to see like the different culture aspects and Uchinanchu around the world. So if you need something to do tomorrow or tonight.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll see if I'm up. I'm gonna try to catch up. I'm gonna try to go back and at least watch some of these. I have been to bon dance before, but as I said, I'm not sure if it was Okinawan specifically. But yeah, anyways, excellent. Yeah. So Holly's got everybody's information in the Twitch chat there. Yeah, I mean, it's been really excellent talking to all of you.
Holly.
Yeah, Holly's the best.
Shout out to Holly, who's probably been dropping links all night.
Yeah, Holly is like the best
Really
producer mod. Yeah, absolutely. Important part of the Silver Spuhui, which is, it's a word that, we work together without being greedy. Unlike those weird Britons teaching people how to be greedy. Weird thing to do. Anyways, Holly works with us here at the Silver Spoon Cooperative /Hui/Compound, where we have no bosses and no landlords. And Holly is a very important member, as well as Positive Synergy and the two Keiki, who are working as they get older and get educated outside of the public school American system. Anyways, so we are thankful to everybody who has rated. Thanks everybody who has watched. Thanks everybody who has contributed. And thanks to all of you for making the time here. As I said, again, we will be having another Asian and Pacific Islander panel, including Vietnamese and other peoples, next Saturday at the same time as this, or Sunday if you're not here. And so just keep that in mind. With that 7 p.m. Pacific time, but that will be on the Luna Oi channel, which is
Raid Dark Native.
And we will be rating out so that we make sure that we share our social capital so that we can increase our mana, in that. Remember, we have to give away our audience to somebody. But anyways, before we do that, thanks everybody. Don't forget to if you want to support us, again, you can Patreon and Neofeud, of course, that game that's sadly spelled backwards because of I don't understand that is the main game that supports everything that we do here, as well as the Patreon and the Twitch donations. And we will be raiding into Dark Native. So let's see, /raid Dark Native. How do you spell Dark Native? Dark N8V with no space. Okay. Okay. Anyways. Okay. Oops. Sorry about this. Okay. Is it working? Okay. Anyways. Thanks a lot, everybody, for watching. Have a good time enjoying Dark Native, another indigenous content creator and educator. And thanks a lot, Akemi and Yaron.
Yep. Kakite, everyone.
Yeah, see you.
Aloha. Okay, I think we've rated. All right. Anyways.